Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. We're on part 2 of our story today, so if you haven't listened to part 1, I strongly recommend you go to it because you want to hear the whole story. So before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's continue with part 2 of our story. The bechamel sauce is burning on the hob, the contents of the pan now black. A noxious, acrid, offensive, bitter smoke fills the kitchen. I pick up the pot, throwing it out of the kitchen door as fast as I can. The smoky contents of the sauce splatter over the yard, the steam rising up from the blades of grass, now singed. With trembling hands, I quickly open the windows in the kitchen to help the noxious smoke to escape and to get rid of that choking smell that is making me splutter and cough. I'm then reminded that Phoenix is in serious trouble, so with a kitchen knife in my hand, I run across the pristine mowed lawn, over the flowery meadow, into the pine forest. I'm afraid of what I will find. In truth, I'm expecting to find Phoenix lying there dead, her body splattered brutally across the woodgrove. With that ghastly entity chasing after her, I feel discouraged at best, completely discomposed at worst. Whatever had so maliciously flung our dog out of the kitchen door and given her chase, this thing, whatever it is profoundly evil, wicked. I can feel the bile rising up in the back of my throat. My whole body feels vacuously empty, hollow. I'm numb from a crippling, incapacitating fear, the likes of such I have never known before, as this is a disturbing, debilitating feeling that I'm not acquainted with. My throat is limp and flaccid, like an inoperable muscle that no longer works, for nothing comes out of my mouth. Try as I might to call my dog's name, I just can't. To my horror, my worst fears are coming to fruition, as I see these huge dog-like footprints that I'd seen in my kitchen, embedded in the dark earthen soil. The evil creature is out here, after my dog. I discover a long bundle of familiar blonde hair, snagged and tangled up in a large hairy lump on a bramble bush, and there is blood in this blonde hair. My heart flip-flops and somersaults in my chest, because I know that the hair belongs to my dog. Now I'm absolutely certain. I know Phoenix is dead, with an irrefutable certainty. I suddenly hear the sound of heavy feet crunching through leafy debris, snapping branches. Something is moving towards me, and whatever it is, it's very big. Oh my God! Oh my God! I want to run away, but I just can't. I'm frozen to the spot like a waxwork statue at Madame Tussauds. I can't even activate a single muscle of mine. What is wrong with me? Where is the adrenaline surge that's supposed to help me get the hell out of here? Then I see it. It's a tall human-like creature, covered in long blonde hair, the colour of a polar bear. But he has the face of a human, with the kindest eyes I've ever beheld. And in his arms, he's holding my beloved Phoenix. My dog! My dog is alive! My dog is alive! This thing is easily 8 foot tall, 700 pounds, with a cone-shaped head and overlong arms that travel beyond the knees. I realise at once that this creature is a Bigfoot. I know this because I've watched programmes with my grandchild called Finding Bigfoot. "Do you think that Bigfoot is real?" my grandson Adam had asked me excitedly, with eyes shining so brightly. I didn't have the heart to dampen his animated ebullience. I mean, how could I? My grandson looked so earnest. "Of course he's real," I said. "Of course he's real." "I want to meet Mr. Bigfoot," said my grandson. "I want to meet him one day." I had smiled at Adam's enthusiasm and brought him things associated with Bigfoot for his birthdays and Christmas. I even bought him a T-shirt which read, "Bigfoot is king of the woods," and another which said, "Abominable snowman is real." According to my daughter, he loved those T-shirts so much that he refused to wear any other T-shirts. So much so that the print was now fading, the shirts were worn out, and my daughter desperately wanted me to replace them, as they were looking tatty, and she was embarrassed about her son's now shabby appearance. So like any dutiful grandmother, I'd sent out orders for more of these T-shirts. I am so shocked by what I'm beholding. I feel as if I've been flung into an alternative universe. Suffice to say, never in 1,000 months of Sundays would have I ever envisaged that this creature could possibly be real. Not for a single moment. I knew my grandchild would have given anything in the world to see what I was seeing now. The benevolence of this Bigfoot is so discernible that not for a single moment do I feel even an iota of fear. It is like I've been hugged with an effusive feeling of security and safety, as if I now know that nothing bad can happen to me while I'm in this creature's presence. His energy is serene, his eyes so gentle. Whoever said eyes are the mirror of the soul, they're not wrong. This mellow, easy-going Bigfoot is not at all evasive or timorous, but actually bold. He moves towards me, squatting onto his legs, while holding my dog in his arms, to show me a huge weeping bite on Phoenix's neck that is bleeding and looks very swollen. I examine the bite on my dog's neck. It's nasty, inflamed, angry. I stroke my dog, while the Bigfoot holds her in his arms. Phoenix licks my hand affectionately, looking quite sorry for herself, as I think she clandestinely is rather enjoying all the fuss. The Bigfoot places Phoenix on the ground. She buoyantly bounds over to me, thrashing her tail on the ground excitedly, as if all the hair-raising events that have just gripped us so wretchedly only moments before have bounded away like a golf ball on the green, and long since been forgotten about, by her maybe, but not by me. It's not difficult to determine that this blonde Bigfoot rescued Phoenix from an invisible demonical entity that had bitten into her neck so viciously. It is clear to me that this is what transpired. Without a shadow of a doubt, Phoenix seems to have warmed significantly to this idiosyncratic creature, but then I think she probably realizes he must have saved her life, and she's a highly intelligent dog. The Bigfoot insists on escorting us through the forest. He seems very concerned about our safety and well-being. It feels as if I'm walking next to a friend, as if it's the most natural thing in the world to do, as if we've known each other for many lifetimes. When we move towards a moist open area of soil, the Bigfoot squats down on his muscular thighs, pointing to a huge dog track in the ground, similar to what I'd seen in my kitchen before. I realise in that elucidatory moment that it's possibly the track of a huge wolf-like beast. Definitely not a dog. It's too enormous for that. But one that patently is not of this world, unless it possesses remarkably skilled cloaking abilities that render him invisible, which I seriously doubt. The Bigfoot points at the print, and then to the weeping bite on my dog's neck. He begins to arrange some stones in a circle. He places a random stone in the middle of the circle, and then points to the wolf track in the ground. All of a sudden, a curious, illustrative and explanatory information appears to be downloaded in my mind, like a telepathic exchange of some sort. And then I hear a man's voice speaking directly through me, with a deep, commanding, authoritative tone that cannot be dismissed as just rambling or disjointed thoughts that belong to me. Not at all. This voice is prodigiously informative, and it's certainly not mine. You have a demonic entity in your home. You need to lock him up in a confined space, and all will be well. I look at the Bigfoot, my mouth dropping open. Did he just speak to me? It would seem so. I then have a divulgence that illuminates my mind with an epiphany. Of course, when my husband had removed the wooden panels on the door to the cellar that had been bolted shut for so long, could the previous owners have been having problems with this demonic creature and managed to contain him for some reason within the cellar? It would certainly explain why all those high-quality carpentry tools had been left abandoned. The previous owners had been terrified of a beast that had been tormenting them and was now tormenting us, and of course my dog. It would seem that my husband had inadvertently let something out into our house, something grotesquely evil, perversely depraved, degenerately immoral, and very ungodly. The Bigfoot is nodding at me. He's read my thoughts. My God, he has. He knows exactly what I'm thinking, and he confirms my thoughts. The Bigfoot then escorts me and Phoenix further through the forest, and I'm just so thankful to him. I know he saved my dog, and his advice may very well save me and my husband. Is my husband, though, going to believe a word I tell him? Somehow I doubt it. To date, he's never expressed any feelings about anything untoward going on in our house, but he'd have to agree that Phoenix wanted nothing to do with that cellar and appeared to growl at something in there. How will I ever make my husband appreciate that we urgently need to lock up this entity in the cellar? How would we do it? What if my husband didn't believe me? It seemed my story about the Bigfoot was likely to make him think I was literally losing my marbles. And if I was wearing his shoes, I would certainly think that that was the case. But it's a risk I'm going to have to take. For if we don't address the skeleton in the cupboard, this thing will ultimately destroy us. I can hear my husband working in the cellar, so I decide to take Phoenix to the vet, as his wound is really inflamed and beginning to swell quite considerably. The vet is a very agreeable middle-aged man. He smells as if he not only smokes cigarettes, but eats them too. I've actually heard raving reviews about him from the locals in the area. I was told he had Cushing's disease, lost a ton of weight, and been informed by his doctors to give up smoking. But let's just say it looks like he's fighting a losing battle. I notice a couple of boxes of nicotine patches standing propped up against some medical supplies on the shelf. And it somehow humanizes him to me, making him much more approachable, as it's clear his life is not without personal struggle. "How can I help you?" the vet asks me, as he places Phoenix onto the examining table. "I'm just concerned about my dog. She's been bitten by something." The vet shaves the area around the bite, and he audibly gasps. "Did you see what bit your dog, by any chance? This is an extraordinary bite. I've not seen anything like this before." "No, I didn't," I say, which is partially true, but I was hardly going to say that he was bitten by a demonic, invisible entity that seems to have the feet of a wolf. "This is a very deep bite, very wide. What could it be?" he says. "What do you think it is?" I ask him. "Well, it looks like it's a wolf, but something very, very large." I shrug my shoulders. I don't know what bit him," I say. Gabriel's account. I was beginning to worry that something obstreperously inauspicious was going on in our home. I'd never been a man who believed in the paranormal, or things that go bump in the night, but something was inexpediently happening in our home, and while I tried to brush it off and find rational explanations and plausible answers for the bizarre threatening incidents, I could not. One night after I dressed into my pyjamas, brushed my teeth and pulled back the sheets of our bed, I almost jumped out of my skin to find a bloody dead pigeon had been ripped apart, its liver, kidneys, legs and heart splattered and sprawled all over the bed. The white sheets bespeckled by blood. It was an infelicious, macabre scene, and there were hundreds of big, fat, wiggling maggots clawing their way on the insides of this pigeon with an insatiable urgency and ravenous appetite. The indelicate sight was grotesque. I wanted to hurl up the contents of my stomach. It was so repugnant. We didn't have a cat at the time, and although Phoenix enjoyed retrieving things, I'd never seen him pick up a dead bird or even a rabbit before. So if this pigeon was his work, he had done a great job of creating a grisly scene that looked far too meticulously arranged for it to be the work of a dog, almost as if something or someone was antagonistically trying to scare the living daylights out of us. It was working. I didn't know what to make of this, but I grimaced and cleared up the mess, changing the sheets and trotting downstairs, quickly throwing them into the washing machine and placing the dead bird, or what was left of it, and the maggots in a plastic bag, which I binned discreetly, away from my wife. Blanche was looking at me with a bewildered expression on her face. "Why on earth are you washing bed sheets at this time of the night? I changed the sheets yesterday. They're perfectly clean." "No, they're not. My fountain pen leaked," I say gingerly. "I spilled ink all over the sheets. It went everywhere." My wife groans. "They're probably ruined now. I'm not actually sure ink comes out of bedding." I was so relieved she'd been downstairs making cocoa when all this had transpired. I know she'd have freaked out seeing all that blood and guts. It was ever since I'd opened that cellar downstairs that I would notice cold gusts of air blowing past me in the house. It was so airy, so creepy, almost as if someone made of ice had walked right past me. But when I turned around, nothing was ever there. It was easy to think I was losing my mind, and sometimes I thought I was. But I always got the distinct impression me and my wife were being watched, and we were beginning to find increasing cold spots around the house, which neither of us could explain. One day I woke up in the morning and went downstairs to have some coffee and a jam donut. I then retreated to the bathroom to brush my teeth and to enjoy my regular morning shave. To my abject horror, when I was shaving, I noticed this red scratch on my neck. So I pulled off my t-shirt and discovered 3 big long scratches across my chest. They were deep gashes that looked like something with sharp claws had scratched me violently. I was so shocked. What the hell, I think? Then I remembered the grievous nightmare of the previous night. I'd seen a wolf-like creature of about 9 foot tall, with a wolf-like face, human body, and wolf-like claws attached to his hands. The creature hovered above my body, floating over me, snarling down at me, glaring at me with abhorrent, blazing red eyes. He was screaming at me, "Get out! Get out! Get out! I will kill you! I will kill you! Get out!" But I thought it was a bad dream. Now I wasn't so sure. I'd woken up with a cold sweat, my pyjamas completely drenched, very soaked. I'd never had such a lucid nightmare before. It had rattled me to my core, but there was no way I was going to tell Blanche about this. She'd think I was losing my mind. But these scratches were evidence that I wasn't. But I knew better than to tell her about what had happened. I didn't want to alarm her. As Blanche, if she knew about this, she'd do her nut and blow everything out of proportion. There was a rational explanation for this, and I'd get to the bottom of this enigmatic, incongruous mystery. See if I didn't. I retreat down to the cellar to continue with my carpentry work. And when I enter, I notice that someone has completely scribbled over the plans I'd drawn up for the treehouse for my grandchildren. I know my wife, Blanche, adores our grandchildren, and was so excited about the treehouse I was designing. Who had done such a vengefully wicked thing like this? It couldn't have been her. I was devastated. It had taken a great deal of work to draw up those plans. I sit down on my workbench and start to redraw the plans for the treehouse while they're still very clear in my mind. I nearly jump out of my skin when I hear this dreadful, inauspicious growl. The only way I can describe it is that there was absolutely something in my cellar. I knew at once. It had to be a demon. What else could it be? I started to say, "Our Father who art in heaven," and this thing threw me violently to the ground. I could feel claws holding me down, and this thing, whatever it was, didn't seem to like my prayers, because it bolted out of the cellar. Now I knew what needed to be done. Later that morning, my wife appeared to have disappeared. I noticed her truck was no longer in the driveway, and Phoenix was nowhere to be found. She had left the place with an acrid smell in it. There was a burnt pot lying on the lawn, next to some singed grass. She returned home after having been to the vet, and began to recount her incredulous tale to me. Now I have to tell you, if she told me that story a few days ago, I would have thought my wife was smoking something hallucinogenic and been spending far too much time with our Bigfoot-loving grandson. But I knew, as absurd as my wife's tale appeared to be, in the grand scheme of things, it was absolutely true, and I was in no doubt about that. "We have a demon in this house. The Bigfoot was telling me telepathically that it has to be contained, that it's very dangerous, that it's getting stronger. That's why the previous people locked up the cellar. They knew what was going on. They knew they were dealing with a demon. That's probably why they sold the house in the first place. When you opened it up, we let out this thing, and it appears to be getting stronger and stronger. It's already bitten Phoenix, who would have died without the Bigfoot's intervention. I'm in no doubt about that. God only knows what he'll do to us. We're in very grave danger. I feel it in my bones. We have to get that creature back into the cellar." Suffice to say, it was decided we'd bolt windows and doors and get a priest around to bless every single room in the house, and that the prayers would eventually force the demon down into the cellar, and then we would bolt it in there to keep it contained. It was clear that this is what the previous owners had probably done. Me and my wife Blanche waited on tender hooks with bated breath until the Catholic priest arrived at our home. He had dealt with demonic activity in homes before, with a great measure of success, and we were reasonably confident that he would be able to help us. His name was Ivan Clark. He brought with him a psychic medium called Zoe, whom had helped him with many of his house cleansings in the past. We had informed Ivan Clark through emails what had been happening in our home, and he emphatically believed that we were dealing with a demonic entity of some kind. From the moment they entered our property, Zoe began to shudder and shake involuntarily. "I feel a great evil in this house, an ancient, despicable evil. It has resided on this piece of land for hundreds of years, if not thousands. It has an attachment to the land upon which this property resides, for it was conjured up from the pits of hell itself. He is the kind of demon that will give you true answers to your questions. It was invited into our reality through some kind of sacrificial offering, but this happened a long, long time ago, through an innocent who had no idea what they were actually doing. It would like to throw you out of this house. It would like to harm you and kill you. I have to warn you that the more fearful you become, the stronger he will get. If you want to give a demon steroids, you feed him with your fear. He will bulk up considerably. I need all of you to be very strong, however hard it may be. I want you to refuse to be afraid, as if you do that, you starve the demon, reduce his power." Let's just say Zoe was the last person I would ever imagine a psychic to look like, but it was clear the Catholic priest hung on to her every word and respected everything she had to say. She was such an unassuming woman, petite and willowy, the kind of person so delicate and fragile, so dainty, you could almost imagine her being blown over by a powerful wind. She had these fine, delicate porcelain features, dark black hair, it done in a pixie haircut, and blue eyes that were so earnestly serious. It was hard to imagine a girl so small and slight could stand up to the hostile venom that had pierced its poisonous fangs into our home, determined to make us victims of its wrath. As a team, we walked around the house together, while Zoe burnt incense and the Catholic priest scattered holy water into every room. We all prayed out loud St. Michael's prayer of protection. "St. Michael, the archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of heavenly hosts, by the power of God, thrust into hell Satan and all his evil spirits, who wander through the earth for the ruin and damnation of souls." While we were doing this, there were disembodied spectral growls and snarls ringing through the house that was so terrifyingly hostile. The piercing, stinging sound literally reverberated through our bodies, causing us all to tremble and shake. But we had to hold it together and keep our composture. Pictures were flung off hooks, vases and china were catapulted across rooms, violently crashing to the ground, and even a bowl of potpourri was propelled across the wall like a frisbee, so the floor was scattered with dried rose petals and petite pine cones. If one of us had been caught in the crossfire, we could have been seriously hurt and even killed. I wanted to bolt out of the house as fast as I could. I was so overwhelmed with a pulverizing terror, but I reasoned if my wife could hold it together so stoically, then so could I. I tried so hard not to focus on the feeling of dread that seemed to consume me. "I've got a name," says Zoe suddenly. "The demon you have in this house is called Marchesai. He commands 30 legions of demons. He's powerful. He's a wolf in a man's form, with griffin wings and a serpent's tail." We continued all our prayers, until the only room that was left was the cellar. "He's in there," says Zoe. "Board up the cellar now. Lock him in there. Keep him contained. It's the best way to do that with a demon like this. Because if we cast him out, he will more than likely return to this house. This demon is a powerful fighter, with a resolute determination, and he will stop at nothing to get back to this property. When the conditions are ripe, of course. If you lock him up downstairs in the cellar, he'll never be able to bother you again." When the demon realized he was trapped in the room, he let out the most gut-wrenching scream, followed by a deep guttural roar. I don't know how I held it together, but I managed to bolt the doors down incredibly well, so that the demon could not escape. I boarded absolutely everything down, and hung a crucifix on the door, and stuck up the protective prayer of St. Michael. Suffice to say, life returned to normal in our home. You might think it odd that me and my wife Blanche live in a house where we have contained an evil energy, but it doesn't worry us, as long as we keep the evil contained, and if we ever sold the house again in the future, we would ultimately tell any potential buyers about the demon in our cellar. But of course, whether they would believe us or not is entirely up to them. In the beginning we heard growling coming from the cellar, but now we hear nothing, possibly because the demon is getting weaker and weaker, locked away in the cellar and unable to escape. You would think that this would be the end of my curious, enigmatic story, but not so. I soon began to build the treehouse for my grandchildren that I'd promised them. These were my older grandchildren, who lived not far away from us in Maine, and were my daughter's children. Adam was 11, Natalia was 10. My son and his 2 children lived in New York. His children were still running around in diapers and were toddlers. I knew that Adam and Natalia would be over the moon to play in a treehouse overlooking the woodgrove. The job was not easy, but I managed to complete the treehouse for my grandchildren when they came to stay with us for a couple of weeks in the summer holidays, while my daughter and her husband went on holiday to Greece. Blanche was so excited about having the grandchildren to stay. She bustled around the house like a buzzing bee, preparing the children's bedrooms for them, her face continuously smiling. "I love our grandchildren," she said. "I can't wait to see how they will react when they see the treehouse." Let's just say it looked amazing. A perfect rectangular-shaped house, with large windows that overlooked the countryside, and a staircase that wound around the tree, that led to a gleaming bright red door, as red was Adam's favourite colour. My wife had made pretty cushions, bedspreads and curtains in the treehouse. We put a table in there, a bench and a couple of sofas. My grandson Adam was an interesting boy, with so much going on in that little head of his, but he was not a big talker. He was quite unassuming as a boy, and could be very absorbed by anything that inspired his imagination. Adam was completely fascinated with Bigfoot, and got grievously upset if any boys at his school said anything nasty about the creature. One boy at his school, called Mark Dundledine, was constantly ridiculing him about his huge passion for Bigfoot. "My daddy says that Bigfoots are very, very bad. They're horrible, and they smell really, really bad, and they eat humans for breakfast." Adam had gone home to his mother in tears. My daughter Nicole, who did not believe in Bigfoot, could see how distressed Adam had become, and reassured him. "You know what, Adam," she said. "If Bigfoots are true, then they're good ones and they're bad ones. Everything has its intrinsic opposite, you know. You have good and bad people, good and bad angelic beings, good and bad apples. There's good and evil in the world, so you can tell your friend Mark that there may be bad Bigfoots out there, but there must be good ones too. You tell him that, won't you?" My grandchild had gone back to school and informed his friend that you got good and evil angels and you got good and bad Bigfoot. Mark had stuck his tongue out rudely at my grandson. "You're stupid to think that the hairy creatures are nice. My daddy says they're ugly, and if you saw one, well, he says if he sees one, he's going to shoot it dead." Adam had been disgusted with Mark's comments and became very protective towards Bigfoot. "You're the one that's stupid," he said back to the boy. "You think that Bigfoot is bad because your dad says he's bad, but you don't even know if that's true." The young boy had proudly boasted, "My dad is a clever man and he's right about everything." I had to smile when I heard this, as I remember when I was 10 years old myself. I thought the sunshine shone out of my father's backside, and he could do no wrong. But as I got older, I realised that my father was far from perfect and had lots of flaws in his character. My wife Blanche had brought little Adam Bigfoot t-shirts, which he wore so proudly, but now they were worn out and faded, so she'd got him some new ones with signs that read, "I love Yeti. My favourite celebrity is Mr. Bigfoot, and I don't care what you think of me, but I know BF is real." My grandson supported Bigfoot like you might support your favourite soccer team, and he would not hear a bad word said about the idiosyncratic creature. My wife wisely decided not to tell my grandson about the blonde Bigfoot she'd encountered. He was so fired up about the subject. If he knew there was potentially one loitering around in our woodgrove, he would stop at nothing to find it. We didn't want that happening. Me and my wife never told our grown children about the demonic entity in our home, because let's just say Nicole would have overreacted and insisted we needed to sell our property, and that was not going to happen. The truth was we loved our home. Life could not have been better for us. My grandchild Natalia was a practical girl, and a great deal more talkative than her brother, but they seemed to interact well with each other and enjoyed playing together. My daughter Nicole dropped our grandchildren off on a Sunday afternoon. She and her husband were flying to Greece that evening. When I showed our 2 grandchildren the treehouse, they were literally over the moon, and Adam gave me a huge hug. "Thanks, Gramps. You're the best. I love it. I just love it." My grandchildren would occupy themselves for hours every day in that treehouse. Adam's story. I was give or take 10 years old at the time, when me and my sister stayed with my grandparents, and very close to my sister Natalia. I was a quiet child. I hasten to say I'm equally as reserved and reticent today. It's not really that I'm actually shy. It's more that I don't really like to talk, unless I have something really worthwhile and important to say. But I am a deep thinker, and have always been a great listener. I'm passionate about listening to stories, which for me are far more riveting than ever watching a movie. The ancients knew this, and tapped into the secrets of storytelling, which was a quintessential part of their lives. I imagine they would gather around a crackling fire, listening to their elders, and the stories would inspire their imagination and allow them to dream. From the first time I listened to a Bigfoot story, I was enamoured by this curious creature, wandering in the woods of North America, with an uncanny similarity to human beings, and I absolutely knew they were real. I didn't doubt that for a fleeting second. One boy in my school, a slightly overweight, rather obnoxious kid called Mark, who possessed a haughty, stuck-up, rather entitled attitude, who hung on to every word his father said, as if it was the gospel truth, but never once did he think for himself or make his own decisions. Mark knew I loved Bigfoot, as every kid's party I attended I would wear a t-shirt announcing my love for the creature. It would seem that Mark loved to ridicule me, not because I believed in Bigfoot, but because I loved him. "You're stupid. How can you love a big, hairy, smelly creature? My dad says they're horrible and they all deserve to be shot." Mark upset me at first, but in the end I refused to allow anything mean he said to discompose me. Honestly, he wasn't worth it. Besides, it was possibly true, I discerned. There were likely to be mean Bigfoot out there, dangerous even. But so were there mean and dangerous human beings in the world. But it did not mean that you could tarnish all humans with the same soiled brush. The same could be said for Bigfoot. As you can imagine, I was excited to be spending 2 weeks in the summer holidays with my grandparents. My pops had told me he'd built us a treehouse overlooking the woodgrove on his property. I knew that me and Natalia would be playing there an awful lot, and we most certainly did. My grandmother spoilt us rotten, making us cakes and homemade lemonade. We even had picnics up in the treehouse, while Phoenix, the golden Labrador, would trot up the staircase and lie in the treehouse with us, happy to eat up any leftover cake. And my grandmother complained bitterly that Phoenix was getting terribly fat. It never occurred to her we were overfeeding her. We loved the dog. She was beautiful, with such an incredible kind temperament and calming, laid-back nature. My grandparents lived in a beautiful house, but I had noticed the cellar downstairs had been boarded up, and there was a cross and a St. Christopher's prayer on the outside door. It was cold and damp in that spot, with a dark energy you could actually palpably feel. It made me wonder if my pops was keeping something really bad locked up in the cellar. but I didn't dare ask him about it. "Go on, knock on the wooden panels of the cellar. Go on, do it. See if there's anything inside," Natalia had said to me. I hesitated for a brief moment and decided it was a good idea. So I knocked on the wooden panel, and something banged against the inside door. It was such a hard noise, and then we heard a scratching sound, followed by a huge disembodied growl. It terrified us out of our wits, so we ran away, our bodies trembling from the shock. "There's something horrible in there," said Natalia. Suffice to say, we never ever went back to the cellar again, nor did we ask my pops what had been locked away in there. Even we did not want to know the answer to that enigmatic question. But whatever it was, we knew it was really bad. Suffice to say, me and my sister played a lot in the treehouse. My sister Natalia loved to clean it up, shine the windows, dust the furniture. She made the treehouse shiny, like a new pin, bringing in flowers from the field to put on the middle of the table. One day I noticed Phoenix becoming animated. Her tail was thumping excitedly. She dashed into the woodgrove, as if she was greeting a familiar stranger that she knew and loved. "You stay over there," I told my sister. "I'm going to see what Phoenix is all excited about." I climbed down the stairs and ran after Phoenix into the woodgrove. I see Phoenix sitting down on the earthen floor. Her tail is thumping excitedly, and that's when I realise her dark eyes are looking up adoringly at a blonde Bigfoot. Although I'd believed in Bigfoot all my life, never once did I ever believe I'd see one for myself. Of course I'd dreamed and visualised an encounter with the beast in my childlike enthusiastic imagination, hundreds of times over in fact, but seeing one close up and personal was something I never imagined would happen to me. I rubbed my eyes, thinking that I have to be dreaming. This can't be real. The blonde Bigfoot is patting Phoenix, and I get the sense they're well acquainted, and that there's a great bond between the two of them. The Bigfoot looks up at me with bright eyes. My heart thunders excitedly in my chest. I wish Mark was here now, and could see how beautiful this creature is, because he would have to eat his mean words up for breakfast. She stands up tall, lofty and majestic, like a human being on two legs, is about 8 foot tall and 700 pounds, covered with the hair of a polar bear. I'll never forget how the Bigfoot looked at me, with the most incredible eyes I've ever seen. And there wasn't an evil bone in her body. Her all-consuming energy is so loving, her nature benevolent and gentle. The creature looks up at me with her deep-set dark eyes, and our eyes meet. When she looks at me, it's as if she's looking into my very soul, reading my thoughts. She moves over towards me and puts a stone into my hands, and I hear the words in my head, "I wanted to thank you for your faith in my kind." And then she turned around and glided away. I remember I felt as if I'd met a celebrity I'd been longing to meet for a long time. I put my hand on my heart and went, "Wow! Wow! Wow!" I glanced down at the stone. It may have been an ordinary river stone, but even today I hold on to that river stone and regard it as one of the most precious items that I've ever owned. If I was running out of a burning building, it would be one of the first items I saved. I think my encounter with the Bigfoot was preordained. When you believe in the good, it rebounds in your life. The Bigfoot was thanking me for standing up for her species, for believing in the good. I told my friend Mark I had met a kind blonde Bigfoot who gave me a stone. Mark knew I wasn't inclined to lie, nor exaggerate, so he seemed bewildered by my rather extraordinary revelation, but he believed me. Maybe he was beginning to realise his dad wasn't right about everything. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.